The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome. Once again, my name is Michael Kane. I'm the Director of Advocacy at Children's Health Defense. Today, we are going to be talking about the pesticide liability shield they're trying to get into Tennessee. Thankfully, it's been stopped by Bernadette. Pajer stands for Health Freedom and others, as well as CHD North Dakota's chapter is launching. We're going to have Alexis Wangler on talking about what happened, this event in North Dakota that Dr. Brian Hooker is going to be at. And then we're going to go in depth with Bernadette Pajer on the so-called pesticide liability shield. Last week, I had Elizabeth Kucinich on the show, who did an amazing job talking about what's happening in the federal level, talking about what the EPA and what Congress is trying to do to effectively have a pesticide liability shield. But the devil is in the details. You have Republican lawmakers saying there is no such thing as a pesticide liability shield. Where's the word liability? We don't see it anywhere. The devil's in the details, and Bernadette is going to walk us through this. This is a really difficult topic. It's not one of those topics that is just plain and clear to see on its face. That's why I'm so happy we're going to have Bernadette walk through all of these details, because we do have Republican lawmakers who are saying, you guys are wrong. You guys are lying. We're not lying, and we're going to prove it to you today to go over the whole thing. But first, as always, we have news, and one of the big things Children's Health Defense is doing right now, we are launching rallies for RFK Jr. Thank you, Bobby Kennedy, for everything that you're doing in New York, California, Florida, Nebraska, Michigan, North Dakota. On September 27th, we are going to be having actions saying thank you to Bobby Kennedy for all of the amazing work he's doing protecting our children and protecting the health of all Americans. Bobby is in the hot seat. Bobby is under attack. Big Pharma has unleashed millions of dollars to try to unseat him from HHS. Months ago, they said they were going to try to do it in September. Here we are. It's September, and that's exactly what they're doing. And tomorrow, Wednesday, is their next phase of this, when fired CDC Director Susan Minares is going to be testifying at the HELP Committee, which Bill Cassidy is head of. And clearly what is happening there is she is going to be trying to fire shots at Bobby Kennedy. She is going to try to embarrass him. Everybody who can get to D.C. tomorrow, please go. It's 10 a.m. We need as many Maha and Bobby Kennedy supporters in that hearing room as possible. Big Pharma is going to be in the hearing room. We saw that just a week or two ago when Bobby was called to the Senate. Once again, we had a lot of Maha supporters there. There was a lot of Big Pharma supporters there as well, too. So if you're in the DMV area, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, go to this hearing. The details are below. The links are all in the show notes, and you can get all of the details there. Speaking of CDC, Paul Thorenson has been arrested. Do you guys remember this guy? So this is the autism and vaccine scientist who's arrested for stealing $1 million from the CDC, allegedly. Now, this has been the number one fugitive on HHS's list of criminals for over a decade, and no one has done anything about it until this administration. So it is being reported that he has been arrested in Germany. He is being detained there, and there are discussions about bringing him over to America. Thorenson is one of the lead researchers in the 2003 study that has been used most often to say vaccines do not cause autism. But this highly moral man is an international fugitive. So It's a wild story. It's one of these stories that those of us who have been in the movement for a long time, this was one that's always baffled our mind. How is this guy just out there in the world living, not really hiding, could be found finally, right in the month where Bobby is about to launch more information about what are the causes of autism, what is actually happening. Thornton, who really does deserve to be brought to justice, is about to be brought to justice. Man, I mean, sometimes I got to pinch myself that these are things we never thought were going to happen. Like, so wow, really, really, truly, truly amazing stuff. Oh, last week, Gavin DeBecker was on CHD TV. Mary Holland interviewed him on his new books, Forbidden Facts. Now, this book is available for free. And the links for you to get this book for free are in the show notes. If you have read this book, please, we are asking you to go to Amazon and give a review of the book. Gavin DeBecker is just a phenomenal individual, was head of Bobby Kennedy's security while he ran for president, and just a truth seeker and warrior, and somebody that has done so much for our movement, so much for Bobby Kennedy. Do something for Gavin DeBecker. Check out that book. And if you have read it already, please give it a Amazon review. In Massachusetts, a lot's going on in Massachusetts right now, but Health Rights Massachusetts is having a briefing at the Capitol in Boston for the vaccine injured. They have a lineup of individuals who have been injured by vaccines that are going to be at the Capitol telling their stories. They might have a few slots left. If you are vaccine injured or know someone who is, please reach out to them at healthrights.ma.org. All the information about this briefing can be received at that website. Reach out to them there for them to tell you the date, the time, the location of this, where it will be happening. That is the end of our news segment. And to start here, I want to bring on Alexis Wangler from the CHD North Dakota chapter to talk about their launch event. Alexis, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much for having me.
So you are with CHD North Dakota. You're having a launch event, and the great Dr. Brian Hooker is going to be coming to this event. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about the event, when it is, give us some of the details.
Yeah, so we are having our physical launch event on September 27th. It's a Saturday. It's going to be in our state capital, Bismarck, at the Heritage Center from 2 to 4 p.m. Doors are going to open at about 1 o'clock. I believe we're going to be in the Russell Reed Auditorium. We're having Dr. Brian Hooker there. We're so excited. Never met him in person yet, so it's going to be great to have him. And then in addition to that, we're having North Dakota native Beth Sanford there, and she'll be speaking about vitamin D research.
That's fantastic. And recently we just spoke and I said, hey, the 27th, perhaps you'd be able to turn this into a thank you RFK rally as well too, and throw up some signs and give your support to Bobby Kennedy so that North Dakota can also be one of the states that is backing Bobby in this hard time. I mean, they really are going after Bobby Kennedy right now in DC.
Yeah, definitely. We are very excited to have that rally at the same time as our launch event. It's kind of fitting perfectly right into it. So we're really excited to have Dr. Hooker there, and we can do it all together.
So one of the things that I wasn't aware of until you and I got on a call just this weekend is that North Dakota, just a few months back, had its own measles situation that occurred. And I was actually unaware of this. Why don't you talk to our audience a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, so we actually we had a quote unquote measles outbreak, and I want to say that there were like 35 confirmed cases for the measles. And it was one of those things, just like what happened with COVID, where the North Dakota Health and Human Services was posting regularly about it. It just kind of seemed like they were driving fear into people. And of course, they say that everyone was unvaccinated. Now, do we know exactly what that means? No, we don't. I have not seen anyone been able to answer that question, if that was that they had a vaccine, when they were younger, or if they only had like one dose, something like that. So yeah, it was really interesting to see how they were trying to uh, invoke fear.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem that there were any deaths that occurred in North Dakota. In West Texas, they alleged 2 children died, but once Children's Health Defense, Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. Ben Edwards, and other were able to get the medical records, it showed clearly these children, unfortunately, tragically, died of medical error. And they were taking this situation and this opportunity to run it up the flagpole as if it was, oh, it's just those unvaccinated people causing all these problems again. Just kind of the same sort of thing we saw in New York in 2019 to get rid of our religious exemption to vaccination as well.
Yeah, I think there was 3 confirmed hospitalizations from that. And I want to say there was only 4 confirmed cases that were under the age of 5. So mostly, I want to say middle school and high school students.
Well, I'm sure that Dr. Brian Hooker you don't get a better expert to be able to talk about that and look back on what happened regards to measles anywhere in this country. Again, everybody, Dr. Brian Hooker is going to be in North Dakota on September 27th for the physical launch event for Children's Health Defense North Dakota chapter. All the information is here. Actually, I don't know that we have this up. What is the North Dakota website for people to go to in order to get more information on this?
Yeah, www.nd.childrenshealthdefense.org. And then you can click right there on the top the page. It says launch event, and that will take you to the event that we're having on the 27th there with Dr. Hooker.
Excellent. Fantastic. Alexis, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know you're going to have an excellent launch event, and make sure to send me the photos. I need all the photos for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Come have some fun refreshments. We're going to hopefully have some stuff from the Children's Health Defense cookbook there for healthy food for healthy kids. And then as well as some giveaways. We have some books. You can get a book signed by Dr. Hooker himself.
Fantastic. Alexis Wangler, CHD, North Dakota chapter. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Great. Okay, so now I want to bring on from Stands for Health Freedom, legendary medical freedom activist and friend of mine, Bernadette Pajer. Bernadette, thank you so much for coming on here today.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
So you and I have been talking a little bit about the pesticide liability shield, what it is, what it isn't, what the details are. And you've said to me, Michael, some of these lawmakers, we need to walk them through precisely how these laws are making a pesticide liability shield, because the word liability isn't there, liability shield isn't there. And because of that, because of the complexity of it, people are even saying we're wrong, what we're saying is false, even calling us liars about saying that this is happening. There's 2 things that I've heard. One is that there is no liability shield. The word liability doesn't exist. And the other one is that, well, the EPA won't allow us to put a warning onto our labels. Those are 2 of the things that I've been hearing that have been coming at us to say that we're incorrect in what we're saying. So why don't you take either one of those and talk to us about what the real truth is in this?
Absolutely. So a lot to cover. I'm going to just kind of skim the top of it, but I want to begin showing you the U.S. Constitution, and then as an example, the Tennessee State Constitution. So both of those, if we could get the slide going here, both of those protect your right to a jury trial absolutely critical. The right of trial by jury shall be preserved, is what it says in the U.S. Constitution, Amendment 7, and then Tennessee Constitution, Article 1, Section 6. The right of trial by jury shall remain inviolate. Inviolate. You cannot violate it. This is so key. And later on, I've got a clip that's very relevant, a video clip that I want to show folks. So, we really start there. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So Section 453 of the House Appropriations Bill says that none of the funds made available by this or any other act, which means any government money, any federal funding, may be used to issue, adopt any guidance or any policy, take any regulatory action, or approve any labeling or change to such labeling that is inconsistent with or in any respect different from the conclusion of A, a human health assessment, or B, a carcinogenicity classification for a pesticide. Okay, so how does that language create a shield? What members of Congress and state legislators need to know is that these human health assessments performed by the EPA, first of all, they only have to do them every 15 years. So they are often completely outdated. They are also highly inadequate. One of the really horrifying examples is endocrine disruption, the ability of some pesticides to harm your endocrine system. This leads to birth defects, so many issues that are, reproductive issues, fertility issues. I mean, your endocrine system is responsible for so much of your health. And the pesticide industry has known since the 1960s that certain pesticides are very harmful to the endocrine system. And yet the EPA has only in recent years begun to even look at, to assess regularly endocrine disruption problems with pesticides. So to this date, there is no human health assessment on any pesticide that addresses endocrine disruption. So right there, completely inadequate. So how you want to stop funding to block something that's so severely out of date is really concerning. And many of the labels or the assessments are actually fraudulent. I mean, and there's been court trials. And for instance, if we go ahead and move to the next slide, the EPA in 2020 did a new assessment on glyphosate, and they concluded unlikely to cause cancer. And so they were sued by a couple environmental groups because they had not assessed it correctly. And the interveners supporting the EPA were, the big cotton, the big soy, all the GMO companies, as well as Monsanto, fought them. They wanted to defend this conclusion because they like to exploit the fact that the EPA is saying it's not carcinogenic. So they want to keep it there. They want to keep the product. They don't want to label it. They don't want to do anything. And so the court agreed, though, that EPA's errors in assessing human health risks are serious, very serious. So they vacated it. So we don't have an up-to-date assessment of glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. So those two things right there are just key examples of why this is absurd to say that you can't fund anything that disagrees with this, with their current health assessment.
So if 453 passes, it says whatever EPA says right now, that's the law. That's the only thing you could sue over or not sue over. You can't sue over anything else. And what you just showed us is the EPA, as recently as 2020, got it completely wrong.
Yeah.
And a district federal court said, you guys got it completely wrong. You have to do this again.
There's like one step in between. They're not saying you can't sue. They're saying the label can't be changed. So what happens is somebody gets injured by a pesticide, they try to go to court, then the manufacturer can simply say, not our fault. The label can't be updated in any way inconsistent with the current human health assessment. So until the
Oh,
redoes their assessment, our hands are tied. That's the evil brilliance of the language.
no, it is. That is brilliant, because they're saying, hey, what do you want from us? I mean, we would love to change this, but the law now says there's nothing that can be done until the EPA, who is largely owned by
Captured.
big
Yeah,
chemical and big
exactly.
pesticides and big ag, until
Yeah.
they change their labeling, until that happens, there's nothing we could do.
Yes, yes. And another layer here, if we go to the next slide, is that the EPA does not require chronic toxicity testing of full product formulations. This is really important because, let's say, like, they'll only look at active ingredients. So glyphosate has been assessed for the ability to cause cancer, and obviously EPA has gotten it wrong, but the full formula of glyphosate has not, which has surfactants and other ingredients that make it more toxic to the plant, more toxic to the humans. So there was a citizens petition by a fantastic group, where it is in my notes, I wanted to jump out at me. Citizens petition by the Center for Food Safety. In 2017, they petitioned the EPA with just excellent information to tell them, please start testing full product formulations. Chronic toxicity is, long-term repeated exposure to something, and they look for cancer, reproductive issues, neurological issues, all of that, things that long-term exposure would cause. And it took 6 years for the EPA to deny the petition. And their number one reason was, we don't expect most people to be exposed to the full product formulation. And in a recent meeting that I had with Ed Messina, who is the head of the pesticide division of the EPA, I pointed out, well, there's 170,000 people at least who develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after being exposed to the full product formulation, your lawn and garden users, that sort of thing. So wouldn't it make sense for at least the lawn and garden user who's only 3 feet from the end of the wand, who is exposed, your landscapers, your maintenance workers, your homeowners, that's where the majority of lawsuits have been. Wouldn't it make sense to do long-term testing on full formulas for at least those categories? And Ed said something to the fact of, well, that sounds reasonable.
Wow.
But they're not doing it.
Well, so I do want to just say thank you to the EPA official who met with you and had this conversation. Thank you so much. We hope that dialogue can continue. It's very important. And when you bring up about your average user, my mother-in-law, I believe, uses Roundup. It's never advertised for you to wear a full hazmat suit. It's never advertised for you. That's not how Bayer Monsanto puts this product out to people, right? Yeah. It's not said like, this is very dangerous, you need to take full. No, people are in shorts and they're just doing it while their kids are playing on the sidewalk next to it. So it's a really, really important point that you make. There's so many users that aren't doing this in an industrial way, that they're like far away from. There we go. We have somebody like in a full hazmat suit. That's not what your average user does when they spray.
Exactly. So Bayer's answer to this, and it's on their website, was to remove glyphosate from the lawn and garden formulations, because that's where the most lawsuits are. And they said this is taking care of our lawsuits. So how they think future litigation is going to end when they remove glyphosate, if they will not admit that glyphosate causes cancer, I don't know. But they replaced glyphosate with 4 active ingredients, one of which has been banned in several nations, UK, EU. When we asked the EPA, did you require full formula toxicity studies or synchronicity studies? We got back word salad, which basically meant no, they did not require that. And when you look at the new warning label on these lawn and garden formulations of Roundup, there's no warning. It just says, be careful, not to get in on you, or don't let pets enter the area when it's still wet. So no warning for, even though it's got an ingredient banned in other nations because it's so toxic. So we really have the systemic problem at the EPA that's adding to all of this. Let's go back to the slide we were last at, because there's one more point that's really important about the EPA and what they have said in their messaging. Right there. So in this letter, and I've seen this written elsewhere, and it was sent to me in some of my communications, the EPA recognizes that additional information beyond data required under 40 CFR Part 158, that's the scientific data submissions required by the pesticide industry, may in some cases have value in evaluating potential effects to humans and the environment. EPA is reiterating the responsibility of the regulated community to report incidents involving pesticides, including with inerts and mixtures, as well as any other information available concerning adverse effects resulting from the use of a pesticide. So right there, EPA is saying we may not be asking for everything needed to assess human health. And if you extrapolate that, it means the label cannot be the definitive stop. Right? They know, they admit there's information but the manufacturer is still responsible, Michael. They're still responsible to make sure their product is not unreasonably safe.
But what Section 453 would do is say, no, the manufacturer is not responsible because it isn't on the label. If this law passes on the federal level. Now, you have been battling this on the state level because Big Ag has fighting this federally and is then fighting on the state level. In Tennessee, you have been successful in stopping it thus far in the last session that had happened. But it's interesting to see a number of lawmakers taking different positions here. And I actually think you have some great clips of this where some lawmakers are defending it, others are defending your position. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that? It'd be great for the audience to see some of this.
Absolutely. I'll try to go rapidly through this. If we could see slide 5, this is the Tennessee House Bill 809, which we got stopped, that we'll have to deal with in 2026. So this uses a slightly different tact, but it says that the manufacturer, seller of a pesticide registered with the commissioner is not liable in a civil action related to the labeling of the pesticide, including a product's liability action alleging a failure to warn if the pesticide bore a label approved by the EPA, right? Okay, so the things we just discussed shows that those labels are not adequate warning. They're not, they just can't be. Let's go to the next slide. When Congress originally passed FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act, they knew that the EPA wasn't going to be perfect, and manufacturers are not perfect, and they are not angels and saints either. And so they have a section that boldly, flat out states, and this is slide 6, registration, not a defense. Just because we approved it, registration includes labeling, that's not a defense in court. But they do say it's prima facie evidence. So already a manufacturer who's being accused of failure to warn can go before the judge in the early phase and say, look, we've been EPA approved, the label's approved, we've got evidence, we obeyed the law. And the plaintiff has to provide enough evidence to say, no, you failed to warn, and we've got evidence in order for that trial to move on.
So Bernadette, the failure to warn is really important because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and other, attorneys not too long ago, this is where they won these big lawsuit settlements for people who got, lymphomas from Roundup exposure, was that it was determined there was a failure to warn because the companies knew from their own studies that they hid that they were poisoning and causing cancers, and they were able to show that. So since that line has been so successful, Big Ag, Big Chemical, they're trying to figure out how do we stop that line of litigation. That's what this all seems to be about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what's going on. They're calling all these lawsuits frivolous, Bayer, Monsanto, but it's absolutely ridiculous. It's not frivolous. And when you get to the discovery phase of trial, you find out about all the fraud and the concealment, the collusion with the EPA, all of that. That's why we cannot, that's why our founding fathers gave us the right to a jury trial, because you need that discovery process. You need access to those documents. And then slide 7 is about, so even the Maha Commission report has been impacted by lobbyists and also by EPA's unwillingness to divert from some narrow language in the federal code. If you look at that last line, so yes, they're going to be looking at cumulative exposure of pesticides, but EPA is going to be focusing on pesticides through a common mode of action. So if the active ingredients act in a similar manner, they're going to look at cumulative exposure, but they're not going to be looking at the synergistic effects. If you've got, 4 different modes of action in a pesticide, they're not going to be examining that. And that's what we've been pleading for them to begin examining, is the synergistic effect. Let me give you an everyday example. Everybody knows how to safely use chlorine bleach around the house. People use ammonia around the house. These are 2 things with separate, risk benefits, as it were. You put those 2 things together, the fumes will literally kill you. So why they aren't examining the synergistic effects of things with different modes of action, that's really important. And you can see they're really, lobbyists are really pushing back on Maha. So what I'd love to sort of move on next, though, is the deceptive lobbying, Michael. The messaging that the legislators are hearing, the public is hearing, farmers are hearing. And I have to say from the beginning, though, I forgot to tell folks that the definition of pesticide at state and federal level includes all pesticide, insecticide, herbicide, fungicide, rodenticide, like rat poison, so many products, a massive amount of products, more than 60,000 registered products at the federal level with about 1,200 active ingredients. Okay, it's a massive thing here. So when Bayer set out to create liability shields through the deceptive language at the state and federal level, they created something called Modern Ag Alliance. And so next slide to slide 8 there. And they rounded up all their biggest customers, all the GMO farmers and such, and all the farm bureaus. There's a very tight group there of individuals. So they're getting them to go lobby state legislatures and apply great pressure to them. It's interesting to go read their Get the Facts, and I'm going to be showing you some of the so-called facts that have been lobbied. We can go ahead and move on then to the next slide. And I uncovered this, just kind of tripped across it, posted online from the Tennessee Farm Bureau, their key takeaways, their bullet points of what they've been trying to tell legislators. So here's this deceptive point. Manufacturers are required by federal law to use the label provided by the EPA. Well, and I've got a slide a little bit later we'll jump to, but the EPA does not write the labels. The manufacturer drafts their own labels, submits them to the EPA for approval. So their language is very deceptive. And then they say there's a concern that this type of litigation, which is like the cancer Roundup lawsuits, continues to be successful. Manufacturers will stop producing these products, which are vital to farmers. Bayer has publicly stated that without resolution to this issue, the company will be compelled to remove glyphosate from the market. Well, Bayer Monsanto lost the patent to glyphosate in the year 2000. They don't have the majority share of the global market. There's a company in Missouri, U.S. owned, that makes it, and companies around the world make it. So it's a threat that really has no teeth. Somebody will step into the void. Obviously, we don't want glyphosate out there, but I'm just saying it's a false threat. And also, they continue to develop GMO seeds with that are resistant to glyphosate. So they're not letting go of it. If we could go back to that slide, there's one other really important point that they put out there. They asked the question, should companies be held liable for failure to warn claims even though federal law prohibits making changes to the federally approved label? Well, that's nonsense. Changes can be made to the federally approved label. And so now let's go on from there and I'll explain that. So I think I just have a slide that shows, from FIFRA, pesticide registration, draft labeling, each application for new registration must be accompanied by 5 legible copies of draft labeling. So there you go. They submit their own labeling. That's probably enough on that. Next slide. So what happened was when Prop 65 in California began requiring labeling of potentially carcinogenic products, they said it has to go on glyphosate because of the IARC, the World Health Organization determination that it's likely carcinogenic. So the first label that was drafted for products, the EPA said, no, we don't agree with that cancer warning because we don't agree. EPA doesn't agree. So a new label was drafted that said, IARC says it's carcinogenic. EPA disagrees. But under Prop 65, we're required to put this on here to warn you that it might be carcinogenic. So an EPA said, yeah, we can go with that because it acknowledges we disagree. But it's not misbranded to put this cancer warning on there the way you've worded it. So they approved a cancer warning for Roundup glyphosate containing products. Okay. This is on the EPA's website. There's the approval letter. So what happened? Did Bayer Monsanto put that approved EPA warning on their products? No. Next slide. They joined in with their best customers, which I think is interesting. Even the golf course association got involved here. They sued the state of California, saying it violated their free speech amendments not to have compelled speech, and they won on the grounds of its compelled speech because they did not agree to have it on the label. But
so what's
EPA's
happening?
letter.
So what's happening?
Yeah.
So what's happening is they're saying, well, we're covered because of the label that EPA is putting on. That's the all supreme that covers everything. Oh, wait. EPA just said a label could go on we don't like. We're going to sue.
Right.
And then they won. So this idea that they're getting this, this independent organization, the EPA, to approve stuff, I mean, that kind of falls on its face. They made sure that once we don't like that language, they took it to court and they got rid of it because of their own agenda.
Yes, absolutely. So it's just such false. So I think now would be a good time to the bill in Tennessee passed in the Senate, and so we've got a short clip of the bill sponsor in the final committee talking about his final comments before they voted on it. I'd like to show that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think we have, I had a longer discussion, but I think we've really done a thorough job of weighing the issues out. I just want to highlight that the bottom line is the bill, one of the statements was, well, you're not going to be able to sue. And it absolutely says nothing about limiting people's ability to file lawsuits. All lawsuits could continue to be filed. The issue is whether or not there could be any liability for some category of the types of lawsuits that are called products liability lawsuits. And so what the bill does is limit liability where it is a lawsuit related to the warning label, which we've gone through. The manufacturers don't have any option on whether or not and what the label says. And so they are unable to defend themselves. And that was getting to Mr. With the Farm Bureau, Kevin's statement there. The businesses are unable to defend themselves. They're put into an impossible situation on litigation costs, if nothing else. If there were 170, it was previously testified, there was 170,000 lawsuits. Imagine if your business was and put in the impossible situation of 170,000 lawsuits that you cannot defend yourself. You have no options except to pull the product from the shelf because it's the only way to move forward as a business. And so, again, we are only talking about a very limited liability protection for claims related to the label on a pesticide. I've seen some handouts that are talking about insecticides. Clearly, that's not what the statute says.
So you see how he just did the lobbying messages, and this senator was so unfamiliar with the actual state law, federal law, anything to do with it. He had no idea that the term pesticide means insecticide, fungicide, rodenticide, all of that. This was so highly concerning. That this is what we've been fighting, is
and
trying to get in there.
And one thing that the bill sponsor admitted there is that it is a liability shield. It might not be a 360-degree liability shield. It's a liability shield from the liability they're most vulnerable from, that they're actually losing in court over. But he used the word liability multiple times. Even I'm not sure if it's actually in the legislation or not, but in his defense of it, he clearly did.
Yeah, well, not liable in a civil action. So yeah, there we go. So let's look at the next one. This was in the House, in the final committee. This was Representative Todd engaging with an attorney for the pesticide industry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I want to start out by asking, I think Mr. Tharp, the attorney, a few questions. In this draft, in this amendment that we've adopted that makes the bill, is the word immunity in there at all?
Y'all can have an exchange there. You don't need to be recognized. Just be polite. Don't talk over one another. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. No, sir, I did not see that word.
Okay. I couldn't find it either. Does this, if we pass it as is, would this prevent any lawsuits for negligence?
No, sir.
Would it prevent any lawsuits from a chemical doing harm to someone?
No, sir.
Would it prevent anyone from suing over design defects?
No, sir.
Would it prevent anyone from suing over manufacturing defects?
No, sir.
Yeah, so he confuses the whole issue there. Would it prevent the law? Can you bring a lawsuit? Sure. Will you win? No, because they'll just go up and say, nope, Tennessee law says, it's got an EPA approved label. Therefore, I'm not liable for any failure to warn. So, it's really ridiculous. And then he goes on to say, and this isn't all failure to warn. This is just if the manufacturer was prevented from adding the warning to the label, right? And the attorney agreed. It's ridiculous. But we did have a hero. And our final thing I want to end started with the Constitution. I'm going to come back to the Constitution. We had a hero. This is the hearing where it did get stopped. And I give a lot of credit. Well, so many mama bears and organizations and everybody, massive push. But our hero of the day was Representative Gene Opal. So if we could show that.
Well, when we were here last, Mr. Tharp, my good friend and colleague in the legal profession, very articulately set out that there are actually three types of product liability claims that can be brought under a statute: a failure to warn, a design defect, and a manufacturing defect. Do you recall that?
I do recall hearing that.
And the problem I have with this legislation, Mr. Llewellyn, is that it seeks to take away one of those rights. It seeks to take away the failure to warn claim. And you probably understand that in our own Tennessee state constitution, all of us take an oath not to vote for bills that are injurious to the people or that take rights away from them that are protected by the Constitution. And one of the rights that Tennesseans are protected by is Article 1, Section 6, which gives Tennesseans the right to a jury trial if there's a dispute in a civil court, for example, in a negligence action. And so one of my final questions to you would be, how is it that we as legislators can take away a right of a citizen to bring a products liability claim for negligence, consistent with our oath not to take away rights from Tennesseans under Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution.
So from a purely regulatory FIFA perspective, there's nothing being taken away by this bill. The other aspects, as I said, there's nothing new. The situation is the same as it was yesterday, and it will be tomorrow. So from that perspective, I can't opine on the legal aspects.
He can't, and that was, I can't, Mr. Llewellyn, I forget exactly who he was with, but pretty much Pajer. So it's absurd that he would present that the legislation changes nothing when it absolutely changes your right to hold them accountable.
Then why are we here?
Then why are we here? If it changes, exactly. Why are we here if it changes nothing? But then he admits, I don't know how it affects things legally. Well, excuse me, this is a law. You know, your impressions of how things are going at the EPA and whether it changes things, you know, with your rules and regulate, you know what I mean? It's just absurd.
So Bernadette, so this is an ongoing battle. It's a federal battle. It's a state battle. There's been two major losses in America, North Dakota and Georgia, both lost. These styles of laws have passed and are on the books right now, protecting pesticide manufacturers from lawsuits. What do you think? We're a little short on time here, but we kind of want to wrap up and tell people, like, what do you think is most important to do? What do you think people need to do? How should people get engaged on this issue if they want to protect their food supply and protect themselves from these poisons?
I think the most important thing is to get educated and get a meeting with your state legislators. You know, don't be nervous of getting meetings with them. You can go to standforfreedom.com and find in the resources these, and you'll have some links hopefully in the show notes, so where to find resources, printable PDFs that walk you through a lot of what we discussed here today, and get that meeting. When they're out of session is the best time. You can have an hour long or a half hour, meet them for coffee, meet them in their district office, much more relaxed, and educate them, talk about them. I've even done that with my own senator who voted for the darn bill 3 times. I did not give up on him. And now he's in a position where he gets it. Right? Because I know even if we kill this bill in 26, Pajer's not giving up. And so we need to educate our legislators. We need that moving forward. And then as best as you can, contact your Congress people as well. It's a little more challenging to get a one-on-one with your congressperson, but you can get a hold of their staff. You can send them information. Your voice is needed. As the public, we need to rise and escalate to outshout the $1 million marketing campaign of Modern Ag Alliance, of the big pesticide industry. You know, we outnumber them in people, and we've got truth on our side. Once legislators hear exactly what I laid out to you, well, sometimes they get really appalled. One legislator in particular in Tennessee said to me, we've been duped. I said, yes, thank you for acknowledging that. And then she became a fierce opponent to the bill, and even told the bill sponsor, sorry, I'm a hard no. I'm not going for it.
And that's really important here. There's a certain brand of legalese that's going on here that is very intentionally trying to deceive those who have the power to vote yes or no on this. And I think that's why this presentation was very, very important, was to just let people know, no, here, and you're going to get different types of legislators. You're going to get different types of lawmakers. Some are going to want to blind their eyes. They're going to try to run away from the meeting, but that's not everyone. And all you need to turn is a handful to stop the majority and to stop this from going forward. So Bernadette, thank you so much for this classroom on CHD TV today, which we need. I mean, sometimes we need to do that. We need to go into the weeds of this. Sometimes I learned a lot that I didn't know before today, and we will have the links to the resource page at Stands for Health Freedom in the show notes below here so people can download the PDFs and the information so that you can empower yourself and get this to your lawmakers. Bernadette, Pajer, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. I'm sure we're going to have you back again sometime soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. Okay, so that was a lot of information, but it was very, very important information for you to understand precisely what is happening. You know, when I had Elizabeth Kucinich on the show last week, she said on the federal level, talking about that, she said, just get rid of this language and we will support you. You know, you'll be our hero. If you keep that language, you're our zero, meaning, you know what's going to happen come election day. But some people, some lawmakers are going to need more than that. Some lawmakers are going to believe in the talking points. They're believing the lobbying points. The money's coming into them, right? So why would they not believe it? You have to help them not believe it. You have to educate yourself, and you have to get this information to them. Because this issue is fairly new. A lot of lawmakers just don't know. Thank you so much for tuning in to us today. I'll see you again next week. Peace, everybody.
My name is Ashley Barnes.
And you are a nurse?
I am a registered nurse, have been for going on 13 years, and I worked the ER during the start and height of COVID, and I also traveled as a nurse in various ERs during COVID as well.
Okay. Wow, we've got a lot of questions for you.
Okay.
Right. Why don't you start with telling us what you saw as a nurse in those days?
So at the beginning of COVID, like everybody, we're a little on edge. Like, what is this virus? What's going on? But I will say, before COVID even became a thing, back in November of 19, we had a weird respiratory season. Normally bronchitis is something that's very prominent during that time, right before Christmas, and then flu usually comes in pretty heavy. But we were seeing a respiratory virus that we couldn't diagnose as COVID. We couldn't diagnose as bronchitis. We couldn't diagnose as flu. It was a cough, a lot of the very similar COVID symptoms everybody was having during the height of COVID. But then COVID came, and at the beginning we saw nobody because everybody was scared to come to us. Then once we started seeing it, the hospital protocols coming out along with it just didn't make sense. Anybody could just wear whatever they wanted to on their face. Wait, I'm sorry, can I start over? Oh, I'm so sorry, I apologize. We were told, we couldn't step without a mask. We couldn't step into a room without full body coverage. But people really weren't as sick as what they were telling, the media was saying that they were. Our local hospital put out a morgue truck that never got used.
What do you mean?
So they had a morgue truck come in and parked it in front of the hospital.
For photographs?
Yes. Invited major news channels in, and all of our local news and media were covering this. And they were saying, we are running out of space in our morgues to put bodies. So they had to have a morgue truck. That morgue truck never got used. Never was once used. So the fear tactics, like everywhere, were being really heavily pushed by our local hospital system. I lost a lot of respect for my coworkers and physicians that I have worked with for 10 plus years. All of a sudden, it was, if people weren't wearing masks, why should we treat them? If they're not going to do anything to protect themselves, then why would we treat them? And that didn't make sense to me, because for one, you could put anything on your face and call it a mask. That's not doing anything for you anyways. But I asked people, I was like, well, are you gonna stop treating the person who's ODing, the addicted person who's going to OD for the 10th time when he comes in? Are you going to stop treating them because they're still doing drugs? Are you going to stop treating the COPD patient who still smokes 2 packs a day? Are you going to stop treating the diabetic patient who doesn't take their insulin like they're supposed to and still, you know, doesn't manage their dietary nutritional needs the way they're supposed to? And the answer was no. Then why would we not treat somebody who's not wearing a mask? Then it came to, well, they should have been vaccinated. And then as a nurse who's proudly unvaccinated, I was bullied by my coworkers for, you're smarter than this. Or do you not believe in healthcare and science anymore? Why are you not taking the vaccine? And I said, I don't know enough about it. You know, it's not been out long enough. We were seeing a lot of reactions coming in from the beginning of people starting to get the vaccines. I actually worked one of our hospital vaccine clinics when the vaccine came out to healthcare workers. I wanted to see it for myself. I've always been one that's gotten vaccinated. Every vaccine I've needed in childhood, for healthcare, to work, I've always gotten what I needed to get. Flu shot every year, but something wasn't sitting right with me on this particular vaccine. So I worked the vaccine clinic. As an ER nurse, they put me into the monitoring section after employees were getting vaccinated. They had it set up where they were getting monitored for 30 to 45 minutes after receiving the vaccine. I've never really seen that before. When we give a shot in the ER, we'd watch a patient for maybe 15 minutes before they were discharged, but never a 30, 45 minute period and having to take vitals on them after a vaccine administration, especially on employees. So I worked it, and within about 30 minutes of the first round of people coming in, I had 3 people have reactions as far as high heart rate. I had people with dizziness, and I had one nurse develop a rash pretty instantly after receiving the vaccine. So to me, that was my indicator, as well as I'm not really sure I want to get this vaccine. Then as we continue and everybody's getting vaccinated, I see a shift in the ER. I see a shift where all of our patients are coming in with more strokes, more heart attacks, and cancer diagnoses that I've not really seen very much in the ER. A lot of pancreatic cancer, which I've never seen very much in my ER career. We had a lot of patients that were young, healthy, never had any heart history, never had any significant type of health history at all, coming in with full-blown strokes and deficits, life-altering deficits. People my age, people in their 20s, blood clots. Yes, we've seen blood clots in the ER, but to the extent after the vaccine, it's been a magnitude of many people with issues. I've seen 12-year-old boys come in complaining of chest pain, being diagnosed with myocarditis, admitted for observation on their chest pain complaints. I never saw kids come in complaining with cardiac issues. So it's been hard. And then I would hear patients come in, if they'd have COVID, they weren't sick enough to be admitted, but sick enough to get maybe some treatment. I knew doctors were doing steroids occasionally just to help with some of the respiratory and coughing. But I would hear doctors say, sorry, there's no treatment. There's nothing we can do for you. I knew it was not true because I knew we had doctors that would treat. It just depended on what side of the science that they wanted to be on, whether or not they felt like there was a treatment. If we even mentioned the word ivermectin in the hospital, we were threatened. Like, this is your job. We don't use ivermectin. Our doctors were not allowed to even mention that to patients. I've been on ivermectin since 2020. I would tell my colleagues that would give me a hard time over the vaccine, and I would get ridiculed as, you're not a horse, you're not an animal, why are you taking that stupid stuff? It took me 2.5 years to get COVID, and I was in every COVID room, not scared of any patient with it, and I was taking ivermectin prophylactically.
So did you just stay in ER, or did you get into the COVID wards?
No, I stayed in the ER, but we pretty much were COVID wards because we ran out of places to put patients.
So here's what we're hearing on the road.
Yes.
The unvaccinated go to hospital because their pulse thing is telling them that their breathing,
right,
whatever, oxygen's low. Go there, then they test positive for COVID. They then get taken away from their loved ones and put into some kind of COVID ward. They then have a bit of oxygen, maybe, and they start to feel good and they want to go home, but they're not allowed to go home. The unvaccinated, they're ridiculed for being unvaccinated. What that means is not having had the COVID shot.
Right.
That's all that means. And then they, majority of them ended up on ventilators, fentanyl death. And all of when the loved ones get the medical records, it's horrific. It's horrific, and it's all the cost of how much, big money for the hospital. So, did you? Because we're trying to get to the bottom of this.
Okay.
And this is primarily, I think, what our documentary is for sure going to be about. I'm trying to uncover it. So I know you didn't work on those wards, if you like, but what can you tell us about what went on there? We had one nurse tell us that when you did register the deaths, you couldn't put in a vaccinated COVID death. You could only put in a vaccinated COVID. So we're trying to get experts like you that were there.
So I don't know as far as documenting what they were allowed to put or not. I do know our local hospital system was tracking unvaccinated versus vaccinated on vents. Their numbers were not accurate. They would always put out that it was more unvaccinated on the vents. I had a house supervisor who was like the head nurse of the entire hospital that runs the flow of the hospital that was actually tracking the numbers because she was sick of hearing it's always the unvaccinated, always unvaccinated. They were putting out numbers that it was the unvaccinated, but our numbers of vaccinated on vents were higher than the numbers of unvaccinated. And she was doing that by her own documentation and going back and looking at the vaccine status because we were told to ask that in triage in the ER upon admission. So you're wanting to know.
We're just trying to find out more really about what you know that really went on in the hospital.
Right.
So about the remdesivir as well.
The remdesivir, my patients seemed to decline after remdesivir, especially after more than 2 doses. They were putting patients on remdesivir who weren't even currently positive for COVID. They had a positive test result, but you know how you can test positive for up to 3 months typically after having COVID. They would have had COVID, their extent of their symptoms would be a month out. They would still test them in the hospital if they came in saying they just felt dehydrated after, vomiting or diarrhea, or still just felt tired and weak. They would still deem them COVID positive and start them on remdesivir. And after they would get about 2 to 3 doses of that, it seems like that's when they would start and end up on a vent, and that they were taking a turn for the worse. I had a woman patient who I got back in the ER from a fresh trach. She had an emergency tracheostomy done. She had an airway disease that narrowed her airway. She had an episode of this. Came to the ER, went for the emergency trach. We didn't have any hospital beds to put her in ICU, so she had to come back to the ER. She ended up being my patient. I was looking through her orders. She didn't have any family there at the time. She was sedated on a ventilator, and her orders were to start remdesivir. And I was looking, because I got nothing in report that she was COVID positive. So I'm looking through her stuff. She did have a COVID positive test, but again, I had no symptoms, no story, no history that she was there for COVID. She was there for a particular airway disease issue that she had. So when I get these orders from remdesivir, I'm trying to get a hold of the doctor, admitting doctor. I'm not getting an answer at the moment. Something told me, don't start this medication just yet. So I'm trying to put it off, trying to get a hold of the doctor to verify this order. I'm trying to get a hold of family. I get a hold of her husband finally, and I said, sir, is she currently positive for COVID? Is she here for COVID? And he said, no, she had COVID a month ago. She's here because her airway was closing up, and it has nothing to do with that. And I said, well, they're wanting to start her on remdesivir, which is the antiviral treatment for COVID. And he said, no, she wouldn't want that. That's not why she's here. She doesn't want that. So I called the physician and I said, she's not here for COVID. She's here and her husband does not want her to have the remdesivir. And they were like, well, she's positive, so she needs it. And I said, they're saying no, I'm not administering this. The husband is telling me no, and this is not why she's here. She still has a positive test from being positive a month ago. They were trying to push it, and ended up, first they had to go by what the patient wishes were, so we didn't start it. Antibiotics or anything to go home with, they meet discharge criteria. And I would say, can you please write them a steroid or something to help them? He said, should have been vaccinated. My morals, I had to battle my morals every day. Would sneak cards of local doctors, their business cards that I knew were treating patients outside of the hospital for COVID with antibiotics, steroids, ivermectin. I would sneak patients their business cards that felt like they were left hopeless of no treatment and that nobody would help them in the hospital, so that when they got discharged, they could go contact these doctors to get help.
And you no longer work there?
I do not work in the ER anymore. I couldn't take it. I am ashamed of my career, not my personal career. I'm ashamed of where healthcare has gone. Yeah, my profession. I'm ashamed of where healthcare has gone. I thought we were here to truly help people, and I learned during COVID that's not the case. And if you didn't go along with the narrative, you were deemed stupid, didn't believe in science, you should not be a nurse. I've been called so many things. But really, I was trying to help my patients. I was an advocate for them. I didn't discriminate whether they were vaccinated or not. I always was there to help them in the best way I could, and I tried to give out as much information and knowledge as I could that I was learning to my patients so that they could make the best decision for themselves. I had many patients ask me about remdesivir. What would you do? What would you do? And I would tell them, you need to research this medicine. I would tell them side effects that I was aware of, but I would tell them it was their choice. It had to be their decision to make. I couldn't make that for them, but I tried to be the one that gave all the knowledge that I could to them, not just one-sided. Our hospital system even tried to segregate us as employees by our badge color based on our vaccine status.
So what color meant more?
So it didn't happen because everybody raised a lot of concerns and problems that would result out of that, but they tried to push it very hard. We were going to be orange if we were not vaccinated, blue if we were vaccinated. And it was going to be right on our badge so everybody could see it. Patients could see it. We would say, that's our privacy, that's our personal decision whether we want to be vaccinated or not. It shouldn't be displayed for everybody. And they said, well, all of your coworkers have a right to know if you're vaccinated or not. Your patients have a right to know. But they would also try and say, well, nobody's going to know what that color means. well, we all have different scrub colors based on our, if we're a registered nurse, if we're a respiratory therapist, an LPN, we had different scrub colors that differentiated us based on our degree, or not our degree, but where we were in the hospital, what we were. And I said, our patients know what that is. You're telling me they're not going to know what our vaccine status is based on our badge color? They're going to figure that out. It's going to be very well known. And I raised concerns about security issues. You know, patients would wait, if they found this out and they knew I was unvaccinated, they're not going to want me to take care of them. There's going to be patients waiting for me in the parking lot when I leave work to deem me a threat to society. Luckily, they listened, and they made it optional that if you received the vaccine, you could have a special badge that said you were vaccinated. But they didn't make us, as unvaccinated, wear something different.
What about the mean night nurses we've been hearing about? We've been hearing about, you probably don't know anything about this being down in the ER, but we've been hearing about strange goings on in the night. Bags being tampered with, and
that I'm not familiar with. I haven't heard anything like that. And like I said, we were busy in the ER. We were. Yeah. I don't think that.
Well, I think you've been very brave sitting here and saying
thank
this.
you.
Is there anything else you want to add to this?
I just wanted to say that I stand with everybody who's been vaccinated and who has been injured, and I'm really sorry for that. I stand with people who felt like they had no other option. I stand with those who are proudly unvaccinated and proudly tell everybody that, and stand up for the truth. And nobody should be discriminated against either way, but we need to recognize that the injuries are real and that these are not coincidences that we're seeing in the emergency rooms in our hospitals and the increase of problems that we are seeing due to the vaccine. We need to recognize it.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was all over the place.
History doesn't wait. This is our moment to rise, unite, and reclaim our children's health.
Join us here in Austin, Texas this November at the Children's Health Defense Conference.
In the wake of unprecedented medical overreach and censorship, the world is waking up, and people like you are leading the way.
We're at a turning point in history. With the pandemic behind us, our fight for freedom and health has reached the global stage.
This is our moment of truth, and we're ready to seize it together.
And Children's Health Defense has been at the forefront of this charge. Our 2025 conference brings together the leaders, visionaries, and warriors who made it happen.
Meet the parents whose lives were forever changed, and hear from doctors who risked everything to speak out. Stand with those who refused to be silenced.
You are going to hear from world-renowned speakers, doctors, and frontline leaders driving the medical freedom movement.
Discover real-world solutions grounded in science, integrity, and human rights.
Join the discussion to talk about vaccines, informed consent, parental rights, and so much more.
And you'll, of course, hear from your favorite CHD personalities, sharing the latest on CHD's research, litigation, and outreach.
And while you're there, soak up the energy, culture, and music of beautiful Austin, Texas.
Whether you're a parent, a practitioner, or a medical freedom advocate, this is your call to action to protect what matters most.
Be part of the movement that is rewriting the story for generations to come.
So please join us.
Join us.
Join us. Let's make history together in Austin.